Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to this Techstrong learning experience brought to you by AWS and Sumo Logic. My name is Cody. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and I'm happy to welcome you to this Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting program ahead, but first I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, you will be provided with a link to access the on-demand recording. It will be emailed to you shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you look over to the right side of your screen, you'll see there are a couple of options to engage with our panel today. The first of which is the chat tab. So I'd like you to start warming that up for me. Let me know where you are joining us today. Next, if you have any questions, we'd like you to send those in to us using that Q&A tab right next to the chat. So feel free to send those in as soon as you have them, and we'll have time toward the end of the program to address those. If you click that handouts tab, you'll see there are a couple of resources that are available for you, so feel free to grab those. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So our topic today is best practices for monitoring AWS. And I'm joined by Greg Zemecki, Senior Technical Product Manager at Sumo Logic, Gabriel Costa, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS, and Michael Riordan, Senior Product Manager at Sumo Logic. So Greg, Gabriel, and Michael, thank you all so much for joining me today. Michael, do you want to go ahead and start diving into our agenda?
Sure. Thanks, Cody, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining. So today we'll discuss a few different things around best practices for monitoring AWS. We'll start off with kind of setting the stage. Why does observability matter? What does it mean? And then we'll dive into the core of our discussion, which is around sort of those fundamentals of AWS observability, learnings we've had over the past decade of working together, and explaining kind of strategies for collection, monitoring, troubleshooting, and even future-proofing your observability strategy. And then make sure if you have any questions throughout the program to submit them. At the end of our discussion today, we will open up the floor to some questions that you've submitted, 5 or 10 minutes there, and we'll do our best to answer any things that you've submitted during the broadcast today. So to dive in, there's a seismic shift going on, as you probably know. Cloud native app growth is driving this shift. And as we look at it from a 10,000-foot view, everything is becoming digitized. IDC had a report in 2020, a few years ago, that 70% of global orgs would have begun accelerating their digital transformation last year. Apps are moving to the cloud. In a few years, we expect global public cloud spend to reach almost $850 billion. And there's a deluge of data. How do you make sense of this data? What data is critical? How can you ensure your applications are reliable and secure by leveraging this data? And amid this market shift, AWS has done some really interesting research about the business app implications of this shift. So I'll pass it off to Gabriel to cover some of that today.
Hey there, and thanks. I'm seeing a lot of audience from different parts of the world. So thanks everyone. Thanks for Sumo Logic team for having me here. I'm talking about a topic that I really like, which is monitor observability. And yeah, so let's start with what you're saying on what we call as cloud operations. So last year, AWS commissioned a study with Forrester, just to understand with a subset of 1,500 AWS customers to basically understand the impact, right, of having a strong foundation in cloud operations, which is what we define cloud operations as 5 core domains, right? So cloud governance, or how do you manage, right, a multi-account structure, right, with the best practice in centralized auditing and security as well, centralized operations management as well, compliance and auditing and cloud financial management, and the last pillar, which is our main topic here, which is monitor observability. So those 5 domains is what we call cloud operations, right? But also not only think about those domains as silo domains or in isolation, right, but the intersection between them. So to give you an example, right? Let's say you're a customer, you are implementing your monitor observability stack, but you don't want to also just have performance metrics on your workloads, right? You want to have the ability to monitor, for example, the changes related to the security across the workload, right? And that workload might be spanning multiple accounts, right? You could have the development account, QA, and production, right? And you're doing your CI and CD and deploying across all of those accounts. So how can you know, for example, that actions executed by IAM users or roles, for example, are related, the correlation between those actions and the usage on EC2 instances, for example, right? So what we found out with this study, Michael, is really that building this strong foundation in cloud operations on those 5 pillars, customers were able to have those numbers that we're seeing here, right? On average, 241% of ROI over 3 years, but also being more efficient in terms of IT infrastructure, staff productivity, right? Being able to decrease downtime, for example, as well, and also to decrease time for time to market, right? Agility in terms of deploying new services, new features, and again, monitor observability is one key aspect in here. And to get this right, we need partners also helping with centralized observability like Sumo Logic. So really happy to be talking here, and I also want to hear from the team here, from the folks in the chat, right? How do you perceive your cloud operations challenge as well? But yeah, back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Gabriel. But yeah, as Gabriel mentioned, observability is key among this shift. It's kind of recognizing how AWS has approached the cloud operations pillars. And as we look at this iceberg, you have to think back and figure out how your business KPIs, your SLOs, your SLIs can then inform this iceberg and the telemetry that you're collecting. So you may have heard kind of, observability versus monitoring, kind of what is the difference. At the very top, you'll see kind of that monitor prong as you look at your logs, metrics, and traces to sort of understand just what is going on. And that is sort of basic monitoring. Why did something go wrong is more of an observability question, kind of the how and why. Monitoring is more something happened. But that still involves your telemetry. And metrics is a really important part of that monitoring strategy, just sort of the basic fundamental health and performance status, point in time understanding of what's going on with your applications and infrastructure. Think metrics around CPU utilization, memory, et cetera. But as you work your way down this iceberg, it kind of reflects the troubleshooting workflow. So you'll be diagnosing, you'll try to understand where, and that's where traces may come into play. Kind of traces are an understanding of an application transaction end to end, trying to figure out where things are going on. And then working a layer deeper, kind of the biggest component of this iceberg, as Sumo Logic sees it, is really harnessing the power of logs. And Sumo Logic kind of started off with log management. Log analytics is kind of our foundation, and then worked up the chain to include the other telemetry. But it's really a vital component of troubleshooting, kind of knowing the how and why. It often involves diving into the logs to figure out what really went wrong and how during an incident. So as we've partnered together, Sumo Logic is born out of AWS. We've been working together for over a decade, and we have plenty of joint customers over that time. So today we'll dive into those topics that I mentioned before, and kind of have an open discussion around the learnings that we've had, both informed by our customers and our joint activities together. As you can see, we have a number of different AWS kind of service designations, Lambda ready, Graviton ready, different competencies. And we're really committed to ensuring that our joint customers are running reliable and secure applications and able to really figure out what data they can leverage to execute on that observability strategy. So like I mentioned, we'll dive into 4 different topics going forward. First up is collection. Sort of how do you think about what telemetry is important, laddering it back to those KPIs, SLOs, SLIs that I mentioned earlier, your business objectives. And how do you then collect and ingest that data so that you can begin monitoring? Second step, monitor. How do you achieve kind of that 10,000-foot view of all your AWS accounts, regions, and services so that you're all working from the same foundation of data in your disparate teams, enable then to troubleshoot, the next topic of conversation. How do you unlock the value of your data? How do you make it actionable? How do you find insights that help you not only know that something went wrong, but also why and how? And then the next two topics, we'll cover kind of the full stack observability strategy. How do you kind of build a strategy spanning not only infrastructure monitoring, but also application monitoring, all the way down to the end user experience, end user monitoring. And last but not least, future-proofing. That's a critical component of building an observability strategy, is preparing for a future without blind spots if possible, especially as you adopt new technologies. Will you be able to monitor said technologies? Will you be able to reflect this workflow as you adopt new things? So to kick it off, I'll pass it off to Gabriel to talk about collection.
Yeah, so I think these are some of the challenges, right, that we've been seeing with customers, AWS customers, in terms of collection, right? So the first one here, really being able to bridge monitor observability, right, telemetry data, not only in terms of performance telemetry data or the logs in terms of your application logs, but also in terms of bridging this data with CloudTrail data, right? So this is bridging monitor observability with compliance and auditing. And like I said, this is a key aspect, right, for faster resolution, especially for security incidents, right? For example, the example I gave before, right? So how can you audit which IAM user role did what and when? So with a tool like Sumo Logic and the integration that you guys did to be able to pull data from CloudTrail and also CloudWatch, you're able to see and correlate an anomaly spike in an EC2 instance usage, for example, be it CPU and memory, for example, with maybe some potential security incident by having an IAM user or role that has been breached, right? So someone is using an IAM role user or role to get access to an EC2 instance, for example, to maybe do something, right? And you're able to correlate this much easier if you have all of this data in a centralized tool like Sumo Logic. So that's the first challenge. The second one is really about lower latency and faster throughput, like we talked in terms of CloudWatch Metric Streams. So we're going to have a specific slide next on this one. But yeah, this is really about lower latency and faster decision making, right? And the third challenge is really what I talked about in terms of multiple AWS accounts and multi-account structure, right? So having a landing zone, a structure that and we have an opinionated service for that, right, which is AWS Control Tower, but having multiple AWS accounts and a landing zone is really a best practice, right? So for multiple reasons, right, you want to be able to scale your environments differently, right? Your dev, your QA, your production, then you're going to have different accounts for that, but also natural billing boundary costs, right? Being able to isolate those resources for security posture as well, right? You don't want to have your development be compromised, your development environment be compromised, and that affecting your production, right? And also in terms of not only isolation, but also agility for the different teams, right? So you're going to have a need for different AWS accounts because you have different teams working with different sets of speed, right, in terms of new services and features that they launch, right? So because of all of that, it's not going to be uncommon for you to have multiple AWS accounts and having a need for centralized auditing, centralized logging as well, right? So that's where a tool like AWS Control Tower comes in. So you can create this very easily with AWS, but then the challenge is, well, I need to have observability across all of my stacks, right? Across all of these AWS accounts. How can I do this more easily? And what we build with Sumo Logic is an integration with AWS Control Tower to allow you to unify the AWS resources visibility. So this is able to have CloudWatch metrics and logs flowing through a centralized collection to Sumo Logic, right? But also the CloudTrail logs as well. So with this integration, and there's a public documentation Sumo Logic as well on how you can integrate with AWS Control Tower. So whenever you your team spin up new AWS accounts through account factor and Control Tower, you're going to be able to automatically collect this CloudWatch data metrics logs, but also the CloudTrail data as well for who did what and when in terms of IAM users and role. And the last piece is Open Telemetry, and we're going to talk about why we think this is the future, right? Both AWS, Sumo Logic, but also even a bigger community as well, right? So Michael, can we go to CloudWatch Metric Streams? So just diving a little bit into this and what we did here, right? So Sumo Logic was one of the launch partners for this feature that we launched in 2021, and really the key benefits here are, so first one, being able to more reliably deliver CloudWatch metrics to a third-party tool like Sumo Logic or to a third-party application as well. So the thing is, before we had this feature, you had to pull this data, right, by using CloudWatch API, the Get Metrics API. So the problem with this is that you could run into quota issues, right, or throttling in terms of the number of APIs that you had. And then you had to actually open an AWS support ticket to increase that number. So that wasn't as efficient, right? So that was one of the reasons why we created CloudWatch Metric Streams in the first place. But also the other key benefits is lower latency, right? So with Get Metrics API, customers had a latency between 5 minutes and 10 minutes. So that was an idea, right, especially for enterprise customers that needed to have insights near real time with this telemetry data, right, with the metrics and logs that were generated by CloudWatch, right? So that was the second key point here as well. So this solution really is just CloudWatch Metric Streams streaming the metrics right into Kinesis data firehose, which is running inside of the AWS account. So they have a visibility on this component as well. And then is ingesting into a third-party tool like Sumo Logic for consumption, right, of this data, right? And if for whatever reason the endpoint is not responding, all of these undelivered metrics go into an S3 bucket in the customer's accounts, so they can retry this automatically as well. This is actually embedded as well. And the last benefit is customers can actually filter this data before they send it to the endpoint, like to Sumo Logic, right? So they can filter to decide and enrich this data as well. For example, being able to enrich with AWS tags is something that we work with Sumo Logic as well. So I think this is one of the preferred path, right, Greg, for ingesting CloudWatch metrics data into Sumo Logic, and we're seeing a lot of traction, right, from our joint customers.
Yeah, exactly. This is our reference recommended way of ingesting the data, because it all starts with the data, right? So to achieve a good observability level, you need to have a reliable data transfer mechanism, right? So I think it's important to use the best in breed technology on the cloud services that allow you to ingest, and then obviously there is other side of the platform. But I think it always starts with the data, and obviously the quality of data is very important. But first we should start with having those data in place in a reliable, secure and efficient manner. And that's why we have just decided this is one of the pillar of collection, but it deserves an own slide because it's that important, and that's why we wanted to emphasize, right? Use the tools that are best in class, right? So, and then that's one of the services that we recommend.
And just to address one of the questions I was seeing here on the chat, so I'm liking the collaboration here, folks. So keep those coming. So someone is talking about adoption of AI to help improve correlation events, and we're gonna be someone's gonna show how they are using AI and ML, right, to help customers correlate events. So that's coming. Thanks for that question. Yeah. So OpenTelemetry, right? So OpenTelemetry is one of the fastest growing open source projects in cloud native computing foundation, right? Was launched in 2019 with really the goal of having a unified framework for generating the telemetry data, right? The observability data, but also being able to more easily collect this data and transmit this data to multiple destinations, right? So, and when I talk telemetry data is logs, metrics, and traces, right? Those three pillars, essential pillars for observability, right? The way they achieved this was providing easy instrumentation of the application, right? And this comes really in the form of multiple libraries and SDKs for more than 11 languages, right? So you're probably going to find the language that you're using for your application as they have an SDK for OpenTelemetry to be able to instrument the application to send the telemetry data, right? They also have an auto instrumentation agent for Java. So that means that less code that you need to build in your application to be able to send this data. The other part of the equation is the collectors, right? So the SDKs are sending those to a collector that is going to aggregate this data before sending to a destination, right? So they have multiple collectors for multiple systems here, multiple operating systems and environments as well. And also they have multiple sources that they can connect with as well. Outside of the SDKs, if you are using something like Jaeger or Zipkin open source projects as well to generate the telemetry data, you're able to consume and collect those with the open telemetry collectors as well. And the last part is really, this wouldn't work if they didn't create an open source protocol as well, vendor agnostic, right? And tool agnostic protocol that anyone could really chime in, any company could chime in and use this protocol to receive this data. So this protocol is the Open Telemetry Protocol or TLP, and allows multiple destinations to be connected with this data to receive the telemetry data. So after you instrument and collect your metrics, logs, and traces, what it means is that companies like AWS and Sumo Logic integrated with this protocol and are able to get this data, right? So you're easily able to send it to those destinations or even to open source applications like Prometheus for containers as well, for Kubernetes, for example. What AWS did after we saw all of the traction on this project, and also Sumo Logic did the same, right? Is we forked the distro, right? And we created our own flavor just to add what we think we could improve, right? In the case of AWS was really improving the support. So this is our distro, AWS distro for Open Telemetry supported. If you're using that distro, supported to the AWS support path as well, right? So you can open support tickets if you have any types of issues. So we also have an upstream first approach to this project. So everything that we fix in terms of bug fixes, security fixes, this is added to the open source project first. And also this is production ready. So I want to double on that as well. So you can use this for production as well. We made sure that this is scalable and resilient, those components, so you can deploy those in production, right? And this allows, again, for you to be able to very easily instrument your application and send it to different destinations, but also even to use it for hybrid environments as well, like on-premises plus the AWS environments and even multi-cloud as well, all by using those common collectors, instrumentation, and having multiple destinations. So both AWS and Sumo Logic are full on, and we think OpenTelemetry is really the future. And I'm not even touching things like, for example, the standard log format that they were able to create so everyone can have easier querying capabilities for the logs as well. So I recommend you guys to really check the OpenTelemetry because there's a lot of benefits. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. You have not yet looked at that. I think it's really worth checking. So obviously all of the benefits that have been mentioned just before, we do really believe in that. So we are pretty much all in terms of open telemetry. So get rid of those proprietary agents that you don't know how they evolve. So for the sake of open standards and avoid this kind of vendor lock-in, right? So obviously having own fork of the open telemetry collector allows us just like, for instance, react quicker on some issues, bring some functionalities faster, like Abdul has mentioned. So basically that's I think one of the benefits of having own distribution of auto. But overall, yeah, the strategy is like, I think that's the future. And I think if you look at where auto the receivers, this is one of the components where it was like 1 year ago. So there's like tremendous progress on the level of supported functionalities and the level of supported services that we are able to collect data from. So really worth checking, and I think that's the way forward for the collection part as well.
Great. So that kind of concludes our collection discussion. We'll move on to now that you've collected and ingested the data, how to best monitor it. And I would say there's definitely an emphasis on achieving kind of a unified view of your data across your potentially growing number of AWS accounts, regions, and services. And I know that's something our joint customers are really thinking about. We commissioned a survey late last year, and Sumo Logic users kind of overwhelmingly reported this as one of their main concerns, was getting that single pane of glass, the 10,000-foot view. Even better, a hierarchical drill down approach where they could go from the account level to the region level down to the individual services and get full line of sight with dashboards into how everything was going. And to couple that, it's essential to have visibility into your core AWS services, built-in integrations with EC2, with Lambda, with your load balancers, et cetera. And like I mentioned before, having that out-of-the-box content, so there's quicker time to value, so you don't have to build and maintain dashboards, having them pre-built so that you can just have this all deployed for you when you get started. And that kind of couples or complements, shall I say, the broader question around kind of reactive versus proactive monitoring, kind of having built-in alerts and monitors so you can be informed when something happens, but also be able to look at your favorite dashboards, kind of investigate them yourselves, and balance the two. Gabriel, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah. Just about down the second bullet in there. So easier integration with new AWS services or features that are launched, right? So the pace of innovation in AWS is really fast, right? So one of the challenges customers have is, AWS is launching a new service that I really want to be able to monitor, observe, right? And CloudWatch might be integrated with this service. But I'm using also a tool like Sumo Logic to expand my observability capabilities. So Sumo, with the integration that Sumo Logic has with CloudWatch, any metrics that CloudWatch are able to capture, you're able to send it to Sumo Logic as well for consumption, for analysis and for troubleshooting and so on. So just wanted to double down on that. So you're not only limited to those services that are listed in here, any service that is generating metrics or any application that you're sending custom metrics into CloudWatch, you're able to, if you have integrated with Sumo Logic, you're able to consume these metrics as well and this telemetry data. So yeah, just keeping the pace with the innovation cycle in AWS might be challenging, but this is solved here.
Great. So let's dive into the next step of the workflow, troubleshooting. Like I mentioned, Sumo Logic has approached this very much from harnessing the power of your log data. We showed that diagram before of the iceberg and the logs being kind of that big chunk deep in the water for trying to figure out the why and how of what transpired. And that's a bit of how we've approached our way of building out our product. I would say complementing that, there's automating things, how we fit and how different observability tools fit as part of a broader kind of business automation tool chain. And we'll show a bit of, like Gabriel mentioned in the demo, how we've tried to bubble up anomalies and help you visualize dependencies among services if there's bottlenecks or errors. But it's something to think about as you build out your observability strategy, is how vendors are automating this process for you and how they potentially complement other tools in your tool chain. Greg, do you have anything else that you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think it's very important, okay, because among all of the big data, lake of data, right? So gigabytes of data. I think the most important part are those little spikes that they got lost, and I think that's important. Those are simply most important to identify the problems and what actually the problems, not only the problems that has resulted, that has lead to that cause an outage, right? So that's where we are trying to help, right? And to correlate the events and to find actually the change that has caused the problem, and that's something that you will see later on during the short demo.
And then following troubleshooting, I know we've kind of approached this a bit from the prism of infrastructure monitoring, not exclusively, but you need to think about the end-to-end full stack observability strategy. We've talked about logs extensively. How do you manage, aggregate your logs? How do you do infrastructure monitoring? How do you then approach APM, application performance monitoring? How do you leverage your traces and spans? All the way down to the end user experience. How do you do end user monitoring, RUM, synthetics, And I think we'll dive a bit in the next couple slides into how AWS and Sumo Logic respectively have approached this.
Yeah, so talking about full stack observability on the AWS, right? So we really started this journey with the CloudWatch metrics, both vendor metrics, right? So metrics being automatically ingested from AWS services, right? And custom metrics as well. So metrics that you're able to send from your application or from the CLI, right, to CloudWatch, and then logs as well, right? Logs from your applications or logs from services that have been integrated, like Lambda, for example. Then you had things like dashboards, alarms, and so and distributed tracing as well with Amazon X-Ray. But really, in the last years, what AWS has been expanded is into application performance monitoring and digital user experience monitor. So we launched features in CloudWatch for faster analytics into your observability data. So this is where you have things like CloudWatch log insights, right? So this provides a SQL-like querying capability to analyze the log data, right? So, and you're also able to quickly aggregate data from different log streams, log groups as well, and filter this data. So you're able to more easily find the root cause of an issue, for example. And we did the same thing for metrics with metrics insights. And this is a way that AWS is able to actually provide insights into your metrics automatically as well. And Sumo also has an approach to that as well that we'll touch on the demo as well. But then what we added after that was out of the box one-click observability for microservices. And this is container insights. So if you're using ECS or EKS, this is why we built that. So you're able to collect the data, the telemetry data and metrics logs, and aggregate this data and being able to analyze, right, to query this log data as well for a central location. This is container insights. And we also added things like contributor insights, which is really performance insights into high cardinality data. So for example, you're able to identify hot DynamoDB partition keys or IP addresses that are driving most of the connection requests, or finding the URLs on your endpoints that generate most of the errors. So just making sure that it's easier for you to find these performance bottlenecks or issues, right? And then you also want to be able to monitor what your end user is experiencing in your web application, right? So for that, we launched 3 features in the last year. So one is CloudWatch Real User Monitoring. So that gives you the visibility into the end user experience on your web application. So meaning you're able to record a sample data from sample users, right? And you record the actions that they are doing on your web application. You're able to see the performance telemetry. So what was the latency between them getting to one page to the other? What was the latency in the shopping cart transaction, for example? And were there any errors that have occurred in this sample of your user session? So you're able to have more insights into performance, again, performance bottlenecks or even issues, right? Then we also add something which is synthetic. So you also want to be able to have canaries or simulate user interacting with your web applications, right? So not every time you're going to have users interacting with your web application in certain time windows, right? Or maybe you're launching a new feature. So that's where you use CloudWatch Synthetic. So you're really simulating a user experience in your web application. And we also added Evidently, CloudWatch Evidently, to be able to do A/B tests for features or feature flags as well, and monitor the performance of those interactions, right? In terms of what was best performant from one feature, A feature to the B feature, right? In terms of latency, throughput as well, and so on. And also which end users had more traction as well. And the last part of all of this equation is CloudWatch Service Lens, which is the service you see on the left side here. And really, this just provides a map view of your application by using the distributed tracing data from X-Ray, right? Or OpenTelemetry as well, the request path across all of your resources in your distributed application. And then you can drill down on the metrics, on the logs and the traces at the request level at every component on your distributed application. Again, for troubleshooting or performance improvements, this is really key as well. And Michael, I wanted to see your perspective on this as well. How is Sumo Logic seeing full stack observability as well?
Yeah, thanks, Gabriel. So we have this kind of diagram that kind of reflects how we've approached full stack observability. As you can see on the right, we also have kind of full stack security solutions. That's kind of a topic for another day, but we're definitely seeing a convergence there between observability and security to ensure your applications are both reliable and secure. But as I've mentioned, I think a lot throughout this presentation, we started from log analytics, and you see that as kind of the base at the bottom. You can use the logs for both security and kind of more operational use cases. And then we've worked our way up the tool chain, I guess, so you can speak in that, infrastructure monitoring, logs and metrics, enabling you to do cloud monitoring, Kubernetes monitoring, et cetera, all the way up to APM, incorporating tracing into the equation, and then end user monitoring. We have RUM, we have a partnership for synthetics, really trying to enable you to consider that full stack observability strategy going forward. Greg, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think there also been a question on terms of proactive monitoring. Yeah, so I think one of the pillars of the proactive monitoring is like to implement observability at each level, right? So not only look at the infrastructure monitoring, but also extend it within your application and to other layers, right? Like Michael mentioned, tracing. So to have the visibility in terms of how your requests traverse all the different components and where will be potentially bottlenecks. How understand your users, right? How they are, let's say, what they are experiencing on their end, right? So I think that being proactive starts first with the implementing the full stack observability at each level.
And just to add on the security here as well, because I see some comments here. If you're using Amazon Security Lake that was launched in last re:Invent to have a security data lake, managed security data lake on AWS, again, ingesting data from Security Hub, for example. Sumo Logic was one of the launch partners on re:Invent for this feature. So you're able to send this data from Security Lake into Sumo Logic, again, to expand observability into the security use cases as well. So yeah, we're going to have probably another session just on that, but this is really a key aspect of Sumo Logic offerings. Yeah.
Great. So now the last topic for our discussion is around future-proofing. So like I mentioned earlier, ensuring a future almost without blind spots as you adopt new technologies. And I think there's a number of questions to consider. We've mentioned this a lot throughout the presentation. Are you in lockstep with AWS? Is your observability solution kind of aligned with AWS's strategy, ready for any new releases, et cetera? We talked extensively during collection about the growing community excitement around open telemetry. That is something to consider going forward, how OTel fits a role in your observability strategy. We've also mentioned this a few times, but adopting new technologies. Will you be adopting Graviton? Will you be adopting serverless, Lambda, containers, et cetera? That is pivotal. Are there integrations? Can you bring that data in? Will you be able to monitor it? This one is a big one. I think it harkens back to the original slides we've presented about kind of the seismic shift going on at large with the adoption of cloud. And that's, can you cost effectively scale? There's a deluge of data, a tsunami of data. You want to make sense of it, but you need to also be cost conscious as you do so. And the way Sumo Logic has kind of approached this as a concern is with a sort of tiering model. So you can kind of tier your data. We have like a frequent tier, et cetera. So if you're going to frequently use the data, you can place that in that bucket and then sort it. So we've had customers, there's one case study that we have on our website about a company that doubled their log ingest, but in the process saved $1 million because they were sort of able to optimize with the tiering structure. But that's something to just be mindful of, because you're going to see data growing faster than budgets potentially. And you need to think about that as you build out your observability strategy. And then last but not least, Gabriel's mentioned this, I've mentioned it, Greg's mentioned it. There is that bit of convergence around observability and security use cases. Sumo Logic's been intentional about being a platform centered around logs, but that can build up to both use cases. But yeah, how can you kind of unify your security and observability data? Is there anything else that you folks would like to add to these questions?
Yeah, just again doubling down on bullet 3, right? So new architectures, right? So be microservice oriented or event driven as well. So in being able to observe all of that stack, if you have a serverless application, especially across multi-account, it's not exactly easy, and that's where tools and like Sumo Logic are really able to help here. So I think these are all questions for you to consider when you're trying to choose the observability tool and approaches. And also there's an aspect of process and people as well, and that goes hand in hand, and there's always opportunities to improve here. Yeah, but this is a good 5 bullets, I think, for you to think about.
Yeah. You need to be elastic, right? So there are rapid changing times, right? So today you need only observability. Tomorrow you need a security, right? So today you need to ingest lots of data and access them on a daily basis. Like tomorrow you shift and you need more of them for compliance, only to be accessible like only once per month or even once per year, and the rest for the troubleshooting. So you look at also flexibility in terms of what kind of level of flexibility your solutions provide.
Great. So now we're going to dive in to a short demo of how Sumo Logic's kind of approached this, tried to incorporate some of these best practices into our product. So Greg and I will speak to this. It's about a 2-minute video, but it'll bring to life some of the things we've talked about today. So here's Sumo Logic. On the left, you'll see different panels, the account, region, service level. There's that hierarchical view. Different dashboards populate as you drill down. Right now, we're looking at a load balancer panel, series of dashboards for your application load balancer in particular. We're looking at the 5xx errors, and you'll see a spike right there. We're drilling down into it. And then this new panel lets you see associated logs, what we call entities. So you can kind of see the relationship as you see here, the namespace, the region, and the account level. And we can open this up in Root Cause Explorer. And that's kind of the anomaly detection visualization tool that we mentioned. So you can see anomalies like errors and bottlenecks and potentially understand the relationship. So you're looking at the error here in the load balancer that we looked at in the broader dashboard. We're expanding the scope beyond load balancer, and we're seeing the relationship. So there's a x-axis is the timeline, y-axis is the deviation, the drift from the norm. We're looking at a bottleneck here for an EC2 instance, and then a DynamoDB bottleneck. And in all likelihood, the DynamoDB bottleneck sequentially probably is what kind of triggered this cascading series of events. So we're looking at the metrics now on the side panel, and you're able to then dive deeper. As I mentioned before, entities is how we talk about the relationship among these different things. We can go to the entity dashboard, go to the dashboard for events at the top, and then scroll down to the actual table events, where we'll be able to actually go into the logs. And like I mentioned, this reflects kind of that log, the criticality of logs for troubleshooting. We're looking at the update table, opening log search. Now we'll able to actually go into the logs and try and pinpoint maybe what exactly went wrong and then triggered that cascading series of events. So we're looking at the log messages now. And we're looking for the update table. And we see
like auditing use case. Yeah, sorry, Michael.
Yep. And we see Ankit maybe the person responsible for kind of what happened. So that's a very
exactly.
Oh, go great.
Yeah, so there was like we finally were able to drill down to find the real root cause of the incident. So actually the spike of the 5xx was caused by some update tables, right, related on DynamoDB. So in fact we were able to locate the operation and even particular user to whom we can then direct, right, in terms of why he did that. So that's why I told that we have done some auditing use case. And even though you see the kind of the query that is behind the panels, right? So on the top above, you see the query, how it has been constructed. And why I'm touching on this, there was a question related to the ChatGPT and how we are using the ChatGPT. And then I think there's like multiple ways how we can innovate and use this. So we've seen also during our hackathons, internal hackathons, the potential. So not only to correlate events, but we are also able to ask the ChatGPT to formulate the Sumo query language, Sumo queries for us. So that was like a kind of also for us a surprise that this tool will be able to do that. So there are multiple innovations going on. I cannot disclose a lot on that, but we are looking at those also to incorporate on the product. So not only on the anomaly detection, but also how it can, let's say, make the different functionalities better in our product.
Yeah, and just to add something else that maybe we haven't talked much, but also after you guys detect an anomaly, right? There's also the possibility to alert, right, to another system, right? You guys have integrations with ITSM systems like ServiceNow, for example. So a customer could implement a workflow that they could alert, and if it is a common issue, they could even auto remediate, generate a change in their change process as well. So there's multiple ways that we can even do faster through remediation as well, right, with your platform, right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, a reference to the proactive monitoring, right? So I was about to answer that, but I think it would be the best way to do it now. So when you have a baseline, right? So you need to assess the baseline for your different metrics and depending on what kind of application. So obviously we do have, like, with our out-of-the-box content, we do have some and pretty significant set of monitors and alerts that can be triggered. And then everything can start with a Slack message, right? So you get notified on Slack that there is like it might not be, let's say, like a very huge critical for the users now, because for proactive monitoring, it all starts when you should be able to detect issues before they impact your end customer, right? So that's why then setting up those thresholds, and with the help of our out-of-the-box contents, you are able to do that. And obviously, like Gabriel mentioned, this kind of integrations with ServiceNow, or even you get notifications on Slack that there is some potential issue. So just like better look at it before it gets worse.
Great.
Yeah, we're going to move on to one of the customer reference over here.
Yeah, so we'll just quickly mention Snoop was one of our early adopters of our AWS Observability solution. So what you just saw before was kind of our out-of-the-box support for AWS Observability. They were able to cut MTTR, consolidate, like I mentioned. That was such a big focus area of our joint customers, is having that single pane of glass, having that hierarchical view where they could drill down from the account to the region to the individual namespaces. And they've been a great customer and partner along the way. And if you're interested actually in starting a free Sumo Logic trial, you can receive 500 AWS credits when you sign up today. We have an AWS Marketplace listing with the trial. You can scan the QR code if you're interested. And if you want to just get hands-on, we do have a workshop lab that showcases how to get to the root cause of an application issue with Sumo Logic. It reflects a lot of the flow in the demo that we showed off today, but you can get hands-on and kind of tinker with it yourself. I think it's we have the link in the handouts. You can scan the QR code if you're interested in the trial, but you can get signed up through our marketplace listing. Well, thank you. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining us today. Thank you, Greg, for helping lead the discussion. I think we have a couple questions, so I will go back to the chat and try and answer your questions over the next 5 or 10 minutes. I know we're almost at the top of the hour, so we don't want to keep you.
Yeah, I think there was a question here on one of the last ones on the query language, right, that Sumo Logic uses for your searching mechanism. I think there's a public link that we can provide on that, right?
Yes, obviously you can play around with this query language. So it's like SQL-like language that obviously you can try it out. You can play around with it using the Sumo free trial account. And obviously you can revert back to. You can create a panels and dashboards with that. So I think it's possible. Yeah, it's for sure possible to try it out, right? So obviously, if you don't like to play around with that, there is like multiple out of the box content that you get that you don't require you to get into the specifics. So so whoever likes to do, let's say, more technical stuff and just dive into more technical stuff, we can try it out with that. But obviously, this is something that we also try to we're trying to enhance the language itself with also some AI capabilities, so analytics. So we are having a mechanism to reduce the number of like log reduce, right? So or log compare. So there's like different operators that require that utilize the analytics engines and allow you to better get the better results in terms of how you query the data.
Yeah, there was another question on the on the demo that you guys showed, right? What were the sources of the data collected? So I think it touched mostly on metrics and logs, but you can also have tracing, right? Distributed tracing data, and is that covered on the workshop that customers have access to?
I'm not sure about the workshop, but Greg, do you want to speak to tracing collection if possible?
Yes, obviously. So yeah, it's obviously for tracing. It's important that you instrument your application to be able to get the telemetry data. And like I mentioned, infrastructure monitoring is at the bottom of the layer of full stack observability. So as you move on and you collect more of the data, so the demo was specifically focused on infrastructure monitoring use case, but obviously you can go up and collect more and more data, and those telemetry data are also queryable in the same way as logs and metrics, right? So we have a query languages for all the three pillars of observability, if I can say so. That you can do it like that. So also not sure about the demo in terms of whether this includes tracing, but yeah, overall that would be my answer for that.
And then is there anything else we'd like to add about proactive monitoring? I feel like we covered most of it, but there was that question about
yeah, I was trying to answer it along the lines, right? So just like to summarize, to make sure that we have, let's say, a full stack observability, so all the levels of telemetry should be obviously kind of foundation for us, and then I think set up the baseline for your applications, and with the help of our pre-built monitoring and alerting mechanism, that would something help you to achieve that level of proactive monitoring, right? So, and obviously the RCE is like more for a troubleshooting use case. So just evaluate post-mortem, post-factum what has happened, right? Within your application.
Yeah, and when it comes to the monitors and alerts, we can fire an alert for like an EC2 instance based off memory or CPU utilization. If it reaches a certain threshold within a certain time interval, you get notified to ensure, help ensure, like Greg was mentioning, before something goes very wrong. So it's trying to find that sweet spot so that you can be proactive and be on top of things and get alerted and be able to remediate or understand what's happening before things happen.
Yeah, and just to add something else that we haven't touched, but that is possible also with the integration of Sumo Logic and AWS. So whenever an alert is generated, as well, we're talking about anomaly detection, but whenever an alert is generated, you can send that event right to a webhook. So you could also send it, for example, to Systems Manager, for example, to an event bridge on a webhook, and then use that to have some action, right? Again, could be remediation action if it's a non-issue that you know how to solve it, right? Just so you have faster remediation, but it could also be other types of integrations with AWS services, like running an automation workflow on Systems Manager automation. So there's multiple ways that we've seen customers being able to faster understand and what was the issue and correct it as well. And again, this is a very cool integration that we have available with Sumo Logic as well, alerting. Yep.
Well,
Awesome.
great. I think we.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
sorry,
just
Stu.
wanted to check with the audience if there's any other challenges that you guys are seeing on the field that maybe we haven't touched, but also feel free to send to our emails as well. You're gonna receive this deck presentation. You're gonna have our email, so feel free to contact us as well with those challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. I echo what you said. Stay connected with us. We'd love to engage with you if you have any questions. It's been a very lively and spirited discussion, so I appreciate everyone staying so engaged over the hour. And thank you both, Greg and Gabriel, for joining me in this discussion.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And Michael, thank you for joining us as well. So to our panel, Gabriel, Greg, Michael, thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate the insights that you guys bring. And I really appreciate the time that you take out of your schedule to put together these demos, these presentations, and to come on and talk with us. So again, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
So I'd like to remind our audience that the session was recorded. So perhaps you missed the beginning, or maybe you're not even hearing me now because you had to leave early. You will be receiving a copy of this recording via email. It should be in your inbox shortly after we conclude our live session. Otherwise, it will be living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing are Mary P., Quabina A., Jason E., and Karen S. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. You should be receiving that in about the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see that email, please do check your spam folder. I'd like to thank AWS and Sumo Logic for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone who has joined us for the past hour, thank you so much for being here. We really value your time, and we also really value your feedback. So there is a survey that will pop up on your screen as soon as we close out. Please let us know your thoughts about our program today, or perhaps what you'd like to see on an upcoming program. Either way, we'd hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day. And Greg, Gabriel, Michael, thank you all once more.
Thank you. Have a nice week.
Thank you.
Thank you.